They told me I had 48 hours to move my truck, or else they said they'd tow it away at my expense. But what they didn't know was that the truck they were trying to remove, it was parked right at the heart of the driving academy that's been in my family for generations. And the land they were standing on, it wasn't theirs. So today I want to tell you how I stood my ground against an entitled HOA that tried to take over my father's legacy, and how they learned the hard way that messing with the wrong person can come at a price. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, because I promise you're about to enjoy one of the most satisfying narrated stories you've ever heard. I thought I had finally found peace until they came knocking. I stood there staring down at the letter in my hand, feeling the heat rise in my chest as I read each smug, self-important word. The Maple Ridge Community Management Association, so polished, so official sounding it almost sparkled, was demanding that I remove my old Ford F-150 pickup truck from the parking lot of Carter Driving Academy, the driver training center my father built with his own two hands. My center, my land, my family's legacy. If I didn't comply within 48 hours, they warned, they would have the truck towed away at my expense and start charging me $500 per day until I brought the property into compliance with community aesthetic standards. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was the kind of laugh that comes when you're so furious, so insulted, that words fail you. These people, these self-appointed gatekeepers of good taste, had no idea who they were messing with. That truck is not just some junkyard relic. It's the same vehicle my father used for decades as he taught nervous teens and anxious adults how to drive, how to respect the road, how to respect life. Every scratch on its faded blue paint is a story. Every dent is a badge of honor. It's not pretty, but it's real, and it means something. But to them, to these HOA bureaucrats with their neatly pressed khakis and their power trips, it's just an eyesore, an inconvenience, something that doesn't fit their shiny little vision of suburban perfection. No, this wasn't about a truck. This was about control. This was about people who had gotten used to pushing others around. And now they thought they could push me? They thought wrong. They don't know my family. They don't know the blood, sweat, and soul my father poured into this place. And they sure as hell don't know me. I've faced down boardrooms full of cutthroat executives. I've negotiated deals worth more than these people will see in their lifetimes. And if they think a passive-aggressive letter is going to scare me into backing down, they just started a fight they're not ready for. My name is Michael Carter, and if you had asked me a year ago where I saw myself at 42, I would have told you I'd still be grinding away at my engineering firm, designing safety systems for high-end vehicles, buried in deadlines, meetings, and the endless buzz of corporate life. But life has a way of shifting your priorities when you're not paying attention. 2 years ago, my company received an acquisition offer that was hard to ignore, more zeros than I ever imagined seeing in my bank account. After a decade of building that business from the ground up, I found myself staring at the contract, wondering if maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop chasing the next deal and start figuring out what came next. I was burned out, drained. I had spent years fighting for contracts, negotiating with suppliers, managing a team that felt more like a family than a workforce. But beneath the success, I was running on fumes. That's when I thought of the Carter Driving Academy. The academy wasn't just any driver's ed center. It was my father's life's work, a place where he had taught thousands of people not only how to drive, but how to respect the responsibility that came with sitting behind the wheel. My father, Thomas Carter, wasn't a flashy man. No degrees hanging on the walls, no corporate titles, just a hardworking guy who believed that teaching someone to drive safely could save lives. He started the academy in the 1960s, back when this part of town was still wide open fields and gravel roads. Back then, the parking lot was just packed dirt. The cones were old oil barrels painted orange, and the curriculum was simple. You're not here to pass a test. You're here to learn how to stay alive. I spent every summer of my childhood at that academy. Long days holding stop signs, fetching coffee, wiping down steering wheels between lessons. But the part I loved most was riding shotgun next to Dad as he coached terrified teenagers through their first attempts at parallel parking. His voice always steady, calm, patient, even when the wheels scraped the curb or the clutch burned hot. When my father passed away 5 years ago, sudden heart attack at 68, the academy was left to me. But I was too busy then, too caught up in my own race to notice the legacy sitting idle back home. The place sat quiet, its parking lot empty, the old Ford F-150 gathering dust at the edge of the lot, the same truck Dad had used for his personal lessons. I hadn't set foot there in almost 5 years. But after I sold the company and packed up my apartment in the city, I found myself driving those familiar back roads again. I parked outside the academy, staring at the weathered sign that still bore my father's name, Thomas Carter's Driving Academy. Learn for life. I stepped out of the car and walked through the lot, running my fingers along the side of that old pickup. The same truck where I'd learned how to shift gears and read the road. The same truck where my dad had taught me the difference between knowing how to drive and understanding why it mattered. The building itself was showing its age. Peeling paint, rusted chain link fences, weeds creeping through the cracks in the pavement. But standing there, I didn't see decay. I saw possibility. I saw memories waiting patiently for someone to care again. I made a decision right then and there. I put my money where my heart was. I brought in local contractors, not to erase the past, but to honor it. Fresh paint on the walls, the fence mended, the cones standing straight and ready in the lot. But that old Ford F-150, I left it right where my father had parked it, like a sentinel, like a promise. I wasn't here to turn my father's academy into some corporate training mill. I wasn't here for profit. I was here to carry on his mission, to teach the way he taught, to remind people that driving isn't about passing a test. It's about staying alive. Maybe you felt it too, that quiet pull of something unfinished, a piece of your own history calling you back, a place, a memory, a promise that won't let you walk away. For me, it was this academy, this truck, this legacy. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that while I was busy bringing my father's dream back to life, someone else was already making plans to steal it from me. The first few weeks back at the academy felt peaceful, almost like coming home. I spent my mornings walking the lot, tightening bolts on the practice cars, wiping down the dusty counters inside the office. The building was waking up again, and so was I. But peace like that, it never lasts. It started with a neighborly chat over coffee. Frank Delgado, my closest neighbor and one of my father's oldest friends, leaned casually against the doorway, thermos in hand, that same sharp glint in his eyes that I remembered from childhood. "Morning, Michael," he said with a knowing smile. "I see the welcome wagon paid you a visit." "You mean the letter from the HOA?" I asked, my voice tight. Frank gave a slow nod. "Robert Hayes and his crew, been throwing their weight around more and more these last few years. Ever since they built that shiny new development on the north side, they've acted like they run the whole damn town." I clenched my jaw. "They ever try that nonsense with you?" Frank's grin didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, they tried. Said my old tool shed wasn't up to their precious standards. I told Robert exactly where he could shove his violation notice. Haven't heard from him since." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping. "But you, Michael, they see an opening. They think you're green. They've been using your academy like it's theirs, holding their elite drivers club events here for years, races, obstacle courses, private lessons, all without asking, all while charging people a nice little fee." I stared at him, the words sinking in like ice water down my spine. "Wait, you're serious?" Frank's expression didn't change. "Dead serious. Hell, they even post the photos online. Check their website." I rushed inside, hands trembling, pulled up the site on my laptop. And there it was, page after page of smiling faces posing next to race-ready sports cars, timed courses, group events, banners strung across the academy lot with their logo. My father's lot, my father's cones, my father's legacy, without permission, without respect. My stomach twisted. I felt something deeper than anger. This was betrayal. They weren't just trespassing. They were defiling what my father built with his own hands. I could still hear my dad's voice, calm but steady. Michael, driving is about respect. For the road, for life, and for the people who share it with you. But these people, they had turned it into a circus. I stared at the event announcement for the upcoming annual Elite Driving Challenge. A full weekend of racing, private lessons, and an awards banquet. On my land. I sat frozen for a long moment, staring at the screen. The rage thickened my throat. Then I picked up my phone. "Lisa," I said the moment she answered. "I need your help." Lisa Morgan didn't miss a beat. "What's going on?" I told her everything. The trespassing, the events, the HOA's smug letter about my father's truck. She listened quietly, then her voice turned sharp as a blade. "Michael, this isn't just a neighbor dispute. This is criminal trespass. And if they're collecting money on your property, we might be looking at fraud." I felt my hands clench into fists. "So what do I do?" Lisa's voice was steady, unflinching. "Don't respond to the HOA yet. Don't show your hand. Start documenting everything. Screenshots, photos, any proof you can gather. If they've been at this for years, we'll catch them red-handed." "And the truck?" "If they so much as touch it," she replied, "that's theft." "No question." She paused. Then her voice softened, just a little. "They're counting on you rolling over, Michael. On you being too polite, too new, too soft. But they have no idea who they're dealing with." Neither did they. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe someone's tried to take what your family built, what your parents worked their whole lives for, thinking you'd be too nice, too quiet to fight back. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to make damn sure they regretted ever thinking they could steal what my father built. The weeks that followed were a test of patience and focus. Every morning before the contractors arrived, I walked the lot with my coffee in hand, watching, waiting. The cameras Lisa and I had installed were small, discreet, placed at every angle of the property. They captured everything. The elite drivers club members setting up cones, unloading their flashy sports cars, posing for group photos like they owned the place. The footage made my stomach turn. But as Lisa reminded me more than once, "We're not ready to strike yet. Let them dig their own hole a little deeper." And they did. Oh, they did. I kept gathering evidence, screenshots from their website, social media posts flaunting their so-called exclusive access, even promotional videos shot right here on my land. Their arrogance was stunning, but their carelessness, that was going to be their downfall. The big day was fast approaching, the annual Elite Driving Challenge, their biggest event of the year, a full weekend of races, lessons, and a catered awards dinner. And according to their website, hosted at the prestigious Maple Ridge Driver Training Grounds. Prestigious, right. By the time the first trucks rolled in, hauling their trailers, I was ready. The cameras were rolling. Every guest arriving was being recorded as they crossed onto my property. They didn't even hesitate, just smiled and waved at one another, unloading their cars, setting up tents, banners, folding chairs, coolers. They acted like they belonged there, like I didn't exist. Frank stopped by that morning, leaning on the fence as we watched the chaos unfold. He shook his head slowly, a bitter smile on his face. "Your dad would have chased them out with a wrench in one hand and a torquey gun in the other." I nodded. "Yeah, but I'm going to let the law do the chasing this time." Lisa arrived mid-morning. She stepped out of her car in jeans and a leather jacket, laptop bag slung over one shoulder, looking like she was ready for battle. "You have everything?" she asked. I nodded. "Every frame, every post, every name good," she said. "Let's go introduce ourselves." We walked down toward the lot where the so-called elite were setting up. Some of them glanced our way, unfamiliar faces in their familiar territory. But most just ignored us, too busy talking horsepower and tire pressure to notice the storm about to hit. Robert Hayes was easy to spot. Perfectly pressed khakis, blue blazer despite the heat, that smile like he'd already won. He was laughing with Tom Whitaker, the self-proclaimed president of the Elite Drivers Club. Tom wore his expensive driving vest like a badge of honor, clipboard in hand, barking instructions at the younger guys who were struggling to set up the timing equipment. I could feel my pulse quicken as we approached, but I kept my steps steady, my face calm. "Robert," I said, loud enough to cut through the noise. He turned, surprised to see me there, but only for a second. The smile returned just as fast. "Ah, Michael, good morning. I was hoping you'd come by. Thought maybe we could discuss that situation with your truck." I returned the smile every bit as polished. "Actually, Robert, I thought we should talk about your little event here today." Tom looked up from his clipboard, frowning. "Excuse me, who are you?" I kept my eyes on Robert. "It's funny, you know. All these cars, all these people, setting up like they own the place. But here's the thing." I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folder Lisa had prepared. Thick, detailed, ironclad. "They're all standing on my property." Robert's smile froze. Lisa stepped forward, voice cool, professional, but with steel underneath. "This is the deed for the Carter Driving Academy," she said, holding up the document. "Ownership clearly established since the 1960s. Verified by county records. And here," she tapped another page, "is the evidence of your group's ongoing use of this property without permission. For profit." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as heads turned, eyes narrowing. Lisa's voice didn't waver. "Your event is trespassing. Your club is trespassing. Every dollar you've charged these people for access is fraudulent." Tom stepped forward, trying to protest. "Now wait just a minute." But Lisa cut him off with a glance. "I wouldn't finish that sentence, Mr. Whitaker, unless you're ready to make things worse for yourself." Robert's color drained from his face. His jaw clenched hard as he struggled to hold on to his composure. "This is unbelievable," he hissed. "We've been holding these events for years." "Exactly," I replied, my tone steady. "Years of using my family's land. Years of making money off my father's work." I let the silence hang there for a moment, then leaned in slightly. "But that ends today." Right then, the sheriff's deputy Lisa had coordinated was stepped forward, holding a copy of the court injunction we'd secured the day before. "This event is unauthorized," the deputy announced firmly. "You're all being asked to vacate the premises immediately." The reaction was swift. Angry voices, confused guests, drivers scrambling to pack up their equipment, folding up tables, pulling down tents. The glossy banners with the Elite Drivers Club logo were ripped down hastily, stuffed into the backs of trucks. Tom tried to argue, but the deputy wasn't having it. Robert stood frozen, lips pressed into a thin line, watching the empire he thought he controlled crumble right in front of him. I stood there, arms crossed, watching it all unfold. The takedown they never saw coming. And I couldn't help but think, my dad would have loved this. The dust hadn't even settled in the parking lot when the fallout began. The very next morning, the story hit the local news. "Community driving event shut down over land dispute," the headlines read. But as the reporters dug deeper, thanks in no small part to Lisa sharing just enough of the evidence we'd gathered, the narrative quickly shifted to something much bigger. Years of unauthorized use at Carter Driving Academy, local HOA under fire. I hadn't planned on becoming the center of a scandal, but once the truth was out, there was no stopping it. The news spread like wildfire through Maple Ridge. Parents who had enrolled their kids in those exclusive driving programs were furious. Club members demanded to know where their fees had gone. And the residents of the Maple Ridge subdivision, people who had trusted their HOA to act with integrity, were suddenly asking some very hard questions. And Robert Hayes? He stopped smiling. The HOA board scrambled to contain the damage. Emergency meetings were called. Statements were issued. Words like misunderstanding and administrative error were thrown around like lifelines. But it was too late. Lisa helped me file an official civil claim for trespassing, unauthorized commercial use, and restitution for the years they had profited from my family's property without consent. The legal paperwork was rock solid. Their attorney's first response was bluster. The second was negotiation. It was in one of those tense settlement meetings that Robert, still clinging to whatever dignity he thought he had left, leaned across the table and tried one last time. "You know," he said, voice dripping with that old smugness, "there's still an opportunity here, Michael. We could partner, expand the academy, bring in investors, Turn this into something even bigger than your father imagined. I looked him dead in the eye. My father didn't build this place to line his pockets, I replied, voice low but steady. He built it to teach people how to respect the road and each other. You wouldn't understand that. The room went quiet. I signed the settlement agreement on my terms, full restitution, public acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and most importantly, permanent written confirmation that the Carter Driving Academy was entirely outside of HOA jurisdiction. No more letters. No more threats. As part of that deal, they had to send written notice to every single resident explaining what they had done. No spin, no excuses, just the truth. But even as the legal fight wrapped up, I knew there was still something unfinished. I stood in the academy lot one evening as the sun dipped low behind the trees, the sky awash in gold and soft pink. The place was quiet now, peaceful, the way it should be. Frank walked up, hands stuffed in his pockets. "Feels good, doesn't it?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "It does, but I keep thinking about all those kids, all the families who put their trust in those people." Frank gave a soft grunt of agreement. "Yeah, people deserve better." That's when I made the decision that would shape the next chapter of the academy. With Lisa's help, I worked to restructure the business, not just as a private school, but as a community-focused nonprofit. The mission was clear: affordable, accessible driver education for everyone, not just those who could pay a premium club fees. We brought in retired instructors like Frank. We offered scholarships for underprivileged teens. We hosted free safety workshops for parents and new drivers. We rebuilt trust, not through lawsuits or press conferences, but through honest work. And the truck? Oh, I kept that truck. Right where it's always been, at the front of the lot, under the sign bearing my father's name. I had it cleaned up a bit, gave it a fresh coat of paint, but left the dents and scratches right where they were. Those marks tell a story of lessons learned, of patience, of battles fought and won. I even mounted a small plaque next to it. It reads, "Thomas Carter's Driving Academy. Learn for life. Respect the road. Respect each other." Some weekends I still sit behind the wheel of that old Ford F-150, coffee in hand, watching the next generation of drivers line up nervously at the cones. Watching Frank coach them through the basics with that same steady, patient tone my father used. And every time I see one of them finally nail that parallel park after a dozen failed tries, I can't help but smile. Maybe they'll never know the fight it took to keep this place standing. But that's okay, because the real victory isn't in the headlines or the court documents. The real victory is in knowing that my father's mission lives on. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that standing your ground isn't about pride. It's about doing what's right, about honoring the people who came before you, and protecting what they built for the people who will come after. Have you ever been there yourself? Felt like the world was pushing back, but deep down, you knew you couldn't just walk away? If you have, then you understand exactly why I stood my ground. Because sometimes the best way to win is to stay standing when everyone expects you to fall. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever had to fight for something that mattered, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your story too. So, what would you have done in my place? Would you have backed down, or would you have stood your ground to protect what your family built? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced a moment where someone tried to take what was rightfully yours? Share your story in the comments below, because sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the battles we fight quietly but bravely. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more narrated stories just like this one. Real stories, real lessons, told from the heart. Thanks for listening. This has been another episode of Narrated Stories. And remember, sometimes standing your ground isn't about winning the fight. It's about honoring the people who taught you how to stand tall in the first place.